Today on Coding 101, it's a wildcard episode, and we're sitting down with our very own Patrick Delahanty to see if he'll share some of the secrets of the Code Warrior.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Coding 101 is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This episode of Coding 101 is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create your own professional website or online portfolio. Now introducing Squarespace 7 with even better site management tools and other improvements. For a free 2-week trial and 10% off, go to squarespace.com and use the offer code C101. And by lynda.com. Lynda.com is an easy and affordable way to help you learn. Instantly stream thousands of courses created by experts on business, software, web development, graphic design, and more. For a free trial, visit lynda.com/C101. That's lynda.com/C101. Welcome to Coding 101. It's the Twitch show where we let you into the world of the code monkey and train you up to be a code warrior. I'm Father Robert Balacer, the digital Jesuit, and I'm joined here today by Mr. Patrick Delahanty. If you've watched Coding 101 at all, you know that he was our code warrior for a module. He taught us all about Perl.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. We've changed, Patrick. We're moving to a different format where we will be interviewing our guests and then having them do a module for us. Not a lesson module, but a project module, which I think it's actually a lot better because it allows us to see how people go through the progression of the logic as they program, and then they can actually show us that logic tree in action.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. But before we do that, I want to talk to you. Because one of the things that we've noticed about programming shows is many of them are very good about throwing knowledge about coding and how you code and the different languages and how the different concepts come together. But I want to know a bit more about the people who make a living doing coding. Because it's one thing to know how to code. It's another thing to actually code in the real world.
Yeah. And the real-world application was quite an adjustment to have to make after graduating college.
Yeah. Okay, let's back up. Let's talk about this. When was your first encounter with a computer?
I think it was around 1979 in Auburn, Maine. My uncle, John Konecki, had bought a Commodore PET, and it was like this magic device to me, and I wanted to know how to use this, so he showed me how to load a cassette tape and load up poker game, draw poker.
Wait, what kind of computer was this?
Commodore PET.
Oh, wow, okay.
Cassette tape. Yeah, and we used to have one on the set here at Twit. It's down in the basement now, but yeah, that was the first computer I ever learned how to use. I didn't do any programming on it, but just first exposure, and I was in love with it.
Now, the cassette, I can't remember the cassette on the PET. Was it an audio cassette or was it one of those larger cassettes?
No, it was an audio cassette. It looked just like the old, the awesome mix type that you'd...
Now, even that, I remember that advanced.
Yeah, that's it right there.
As time went on, because the very first computer I had that used the cassette was a TI 994A. And the thing about that was the computer didn't control the cassette at all. So you had to click load on the computer and it would tell you when to hit play on the cassette.
Yes.
Later on, they got super advanced and you had computers that could actually start the cassette so it would load properly.
Yeah, I don't remember. I was 6 at the time, so I don't remember the details, but I'd have to load the cassette. I remember having to type load and load draw poker. And there were a few other games, but that was my favorite poker game, and it still is to this day. I don't remember what it was about that, but that poker game I loved so much, and that's how I learned to play poker. I'm still not very good.
That was your first encounter with a computer.
Yeah.
What was your first encounter with programming? Did you ever get a chance to get behind the scenes on that PET and maybe change some of the lines?
Not on the PET, but when I was in, I think it was 4th grade, my parents signed me up just to get me out of the house and put me in a summer camp thing that was for computers. And so we would go down a couple times a week to the high school and go to their computer lab. It was filled with Apple II Pluses. And so we learned how to do graphics on it, with just low-res graphics, and program in BASIC. And that's where I really fell in love with this. And I came home from that and I'm like, we need a computer. We need to get a computer. And I think it was that Christmas where I got that's the Apple II Plus. Or maybe it was the Christmas after, but I got an Apple IIc.
Wait, you got the one with dual floppy drives?
No. This is what we used at the high school. And
those are 160K, right? I can't remember.
No, I think that was 68K.
68K?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
but it's just green monochrome displays, and we'd do the low-res graphics and actually plot out the pixels, well, not pixels, but giant chunks. And then we made programs, and we just do easy little games, and accept input. Like, do you want to do this? Yes. And so really basic programs. But then I got a computer. It was an Apple IIc, and that's where it really started. And I learned a lot more AppleSoft BASIC on that IIc, which I had for quite a long time.
I want to jump into your mind a little bit here, because a lot of us who grew up in the era of the very first IBM clones, I think the first actual computer, the one that I would say was no longer just a toy, like the TRS or the 99.4A or the Timex Sinclair, was an actual IBM PC, like an 8088.
Yeah.
And we also are across the road. We had people who got Apples. And it was interesting to see how people could divide, because I liked programming, but I was more of a hardware person. My neighbor liked programming, and he could care less about the hardware. And that was sort of the double E computer science division as we went down the road. Where'd you fall on that?
I was definitely on the computer science path. And I had the Apple. I didn't care about the hardware. I wanted a modem. I wanted an external disk drive and a color monitor, and I wanted hardware, but inside the machine, it had 128K RAM. That was fine.
Yeah. So I get it. You were one of these guys who, I don't care what's in the box. I just want the box to do something so I can program.
Yeah.
Mine was, I like programming, but I'm more concerned with what goes in the box.
Yeah. And I was willing and able to push that Apple IIc to its limits. I eventually upgraded it so it had a clock, which I'd have to take the processor out, put a clock chip in, and then put the processor back in. It was the only upgrade I ever did to it. But because it had a clock, that meant I could then create BBS software. And so I got a program called ModemWorks, which allowed you to write BBS software and interface with the modem using AppleSoft BASIC.
Now, there are some people out there who may not know what a BBS is.
Oh, yeah.
We started with BBSs. It was a bulletin board system, and the idea was you could leave your computer on, which back then people were still having that great debate of, well, do you shut it off? Do you turn it off? Do you use it up? But then you would allow people to dial in over a modem and access your computer. I mean, some people say, well, that didn't exist before the internet. No, it did.
Oh, yeah.
We just called it something else.
I used to send email back in the late 80s. I would dial up a BBS, and it was some guy who would have usually a Commodore 64 or an IBM. There was a Mac, and they would have it running in their house. And I would log into their system. I would be the only person online on this system at that time. And I would do whatever I needed to do, send email, download things, play door games, and then log out, and then somebody else would go in. A lot of them had time limits, otherwise somebody would be on there all day. But yeah, so I wrote my own bulletin board system, and just I'd have friends call it because I didn't have a dedicated line. So I was like, oh, try it out. But it was fun, yeah. I
had a 286 that I had scrounged together doing some dumpster diving, and I was running it off of a 2 megabyte hard drive, which at the time was like, oh my gosh, that's so much space. And I remember that I didn't have a dedicated line, but our neighbors had 3 lines and they were always gone. So there may have been some stealing of phone service for a while. But it was cool because I would sit there and you'd wait for the modem line to light up, and you're like, oh, someone's dialing in. And then it was a chat room, and I could have up to 4 people, including myself, chatting at the same time. It was something that just kind of blew my mind. At the time, I was like, wow. And my desire was always, I didn't care about the BBS software. I could customize it when I wanted, but I wanted a faster computer and a bigger storage array so I could put more stuff that they could download. And that's kind of what drove me. It sounds like for you, you liked really customizing that software, the BBS, that back end.
And I was a co-sysop for a BBS called LA Blues. LA was Lewiston, Auburn, not Los Angeles. And so they had 2 lines, but they also had door games. So you could go into this BBS and play games as part of it. And one of them was called Trade Wars. Trade Wars 2002, because 2002 is the future. And so I remember doing some customizations to that because they had different spaceships, and
I think I played that.
Yeah, and I think I changed some of the spaceships so they were more Star Trek-y.
I was horrible at that.
I loved that game. I had maps
Yep.
charted out where this galaxy was, and this and the ANSI graphics. It was so much fun playing that. I even though I didn't run a BBS, I bought my own copy of Trade Wars. And I probably still have the registration letter that I got mailed. But when I went to college, I ran it locally in my dorm so that my roommates could come in and play, and we had our own little match going.
The sysop that I played Trade Wars on, that ran the box I played Trade Wars on, he had a big BBS, and it had hundreds of users. And it's a turn-based game. And normally it was you could make 1 turn a day. I think that was the default. He ran it so you could make 1 turn an hour. And so even if you think about Farmville, this was like that version of Farmville. Well, you had to call in once an hour to take your turn, otherwise you would waste the turn. And I think that's why I sucked at it so hard.
But there are websites out there that run Trade Wars now, so people can still play this if they want to. I spent so much time in that game, and I haven't played it in decades now, but it's a lot of fun.
Now let's move past the nostalgia years. So we've established your cred as a geek. You obviously are a geek. You went way back to the days of tape drives.
Yeah.
You went through the BBS era. What made you think that this hobby that you had could become a career, something that you could actually make a living doing?
Well, I knew when I was looking at colleges, I was looking at computer science. I knew that early on that I wanted to do computer science. I wanted to program computers for a living. And I knew there was a thing people did. I saw all these great games, and I wanted to do games like that or programs like that. But I wasn't really sure exactly what, did I want to do the heart of the program? Did I want to do the interface? And I hadn't really figured that out yet. I just wanted to do something with computers and programming.
So it was what were the games of your era? Because for me, when I was in high school and college, the state of the art were like Sierra, the King series or Leisure Suit Larry series. What was it for you?
There were really no standout games because I was on Apple II. I used an Apple IIc until 1991 when I went to college, and that's long beyond the life of the Apple IIc. But I played Flight Simulator and Test Drive.
Okay, yeah.
And just a lot of Ultima. I loved Ultima, and I played all of them up through 6. When I went to college, I got a PC. It was a 386 SX16. I used that for 1 year until I got sick of it and switched to a Mac.
Oh, no. So we lost you early. We lost you to the dark side early.
Yeah, I did not care for the PC, and I just loved the Mac. And when they introduced the LC, the lower cost, I jumped on it. I got the LC too, but yeah, I was doing Unix programming because I went to Worcester Polytechnic Institute, which had it was near digital equipment, so they had a lot of digital servers. They had DEC workstations and. I think later on they ended up getting an Alpha, but yeah, they had a lot of DEC systems, PDP, and those are on their way out when I got there. But so yeah, everything was Unix based, and so all the computer science classes were except for a couple, were doing things in Unix. So I knew Pascal by the time I got to college, but I took C, I took assembly once, and I was done with it. And but then as I was going through college, I realized I wanted to focus on user interface. And there was a human-computer interaction class. I don't even know if user interface was a term at the time, but I loved that human-computer interface class and aced that and knew that that's what I wanted to focus on.
We're speaking with Patrick Delahanty. He's the programming guru, the expert here in the Twit Brick House. When we come back, Patrick, could we talk a little bit about those college years? I want to talk about those formative years and how you really moved into that the UI side, because I know that's really what your passion is for.
Yeah.
Fantastic. But before we do that, let's take just a moment to talk about the first sponsor of this episode of Coding 101. Now, if you've got a project and you want to get it out to the world, you could be a photographer, you could be a videographer, you could be someone who's a programmer. You want to show someone the latest build of Trade Wars 4000 that you just created. You need a site. You need something that's going to give you the domain name that you want, something that's not so hard that you spend all your time programming the back end. You want something that looks brilliant, something that looks perfect, something that looks bright without a lot of effort and expense. And that's why we've got Squarespace as a proud sponsor of Coding 101. Now, Squarespace is your one-stop shop for creating a location, a brand online. They just released Squarespace 7, and that gives you a much easier, unique web presence. It now includes more all-in-ones and a simpler to navigate and operate operating system that gives you a seamless experience between content creation and content promotion. It's also easier to edit. Squarespace 7 allows you to live edit on one screen, which means there's no more toggling between Site Manager to Preview mode. You can even preview designs in device mode, so you can see how a site will look on tablets and mobile devices. Squarespace gives you instant access to professional stock photography from Getty. If you've ever designed a site on your own, you know how this can be sometimes a little bit tricky. If you want to use good artwork, a lot of it is licensed, and you may not know who to go to. Well, now that's part of your package with Squarespace. They allow direct purchases inside the platform from Getty Images at just $10 each for your site, so you'll always be legal. They've also branded themselves with Google Apps, so you can have branded email for your small business automatically set up when you sign up for a Squarespace account. No more going through some weird UI in order to set up the email accounts you want. If you've ever used Gmail, you now get that ease and that power inside your Squarespace package. They also have templates that are designed for specific professions. They can work with musicians, artists, architects, and chefs. They've designed category-specific templates that cater to the site requirements for industry groups. For example, the new Horizon template is laid out for bands featuring tour dates, music players, and a merch store. They also have their developer platform out of beta, so you can customize your site exactly as you wish. We know that you're all coders. If you want to code, if you want to develop, they give you the hook so that you can change how your site acts. You can move beyond the templates and customize it so you get a truly personal experience. Squarespace also gives you e-commerce with all subscription plan levels for which it's available. That includes the ability to accept donations, which is great for nonprofits, cash wedding registries, and school fund drives. And it's easy to use. But if you want some help, they've got live chat and email 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Plus, there are self-help articles and video workshops to browse at your leisure. Of course, Squarespace is mobile ready. You're not going to have a site that looks good on a PC or a desktop, a laptop, whatever, and then looks like absolute horrible Dreyu on a mobile device. Squarespace gives you the tool so it will automatically adjust for the experience of the user who's viewing it. It's one of the things that I like about their back end. Now here's what we want you to do. We want you to start a free 2-week trial with no credit card required and start building your website today. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure to use the offer code C101 to get 10% off and to show your support for Coding 101. And to begin using Squarespace 7, existing customers go to the Settings tab to activate all the new features. We thank Squarespace for their support of Coding 101. A better web awaits, and it starts with your new Squarespace website. We're here with Patrick Delahanty, the coding guru here at the Twit Brick House. Patrick, let's go to your college years. We've got people in the chat room who are saying, wait a minute, did you work on a VAX? Did you work on a PDP-11?
Yes, VAX, I remember that. And also somebody had mentioned Commander Keen, and that made me remember that WPI was located in Worcester, Massachusetts, where Software Creations, a large BBS, was also located. So I could download all of those Apogee games for free and bring them home with me and upload them when I got back to Maine. But yeah, I used VAX systems. They had a lot of PCs there. They had Mac labs. They had a lot of stuff. And but yeah, it was mostly Unix. And so yeah, they start you out with C, and that's kind of the basis. But then they learn Lisp, which...
So what was your starting language? So when you got into computer science,
yes,
what was the language they made you start with? For me, it was Pascal. Everything started with Pascal. I know we've moved on. What was it for your years?
I actually learned Pascal in high school. I took a course at the local college because they didn't have any other... They had BASIC in high school, but they didn't have anything else. So they said, oh, you can take this course over at Bates College. So I took a Pascal course with a bunch of college freshmen and learned how to program Pascal there. And that was good because it broke me of AppleSoft BASIC and the line numbering and the go-to statements and everything. And so I got to learn functions and subroutines and a lot of the fundamentals I use to this day.
Wait, let's talk about that, because that's actually a big issue for Coding 101. We always got people who said, wait a minute, why aren't we just using procedural programming? I like procedural programming. You go from this command to this command to this command, and you just do loops and such. Moving from that to something that doesn't have the 10 go to 20, that doesn't move from line-based but more object-based programming, has always been a big jump for some people. What was it like for you? Did you get it and you understand, oh yeah, this is the future? Or was it one of these things where you're like, why are you forcing me to program like this?
It made perfect sense to me because with an AppleSoft BASIC program, the lines are numbered, so it's 10, 20, 30, or 1, 2, 3 if you're really bad at it. Or you do by hundreds or whatever counting method you use. But they're all in line, they're all numbered. If you want to put another command in, you have to put it like, oh, line 15 and sneak that in. But with Pascal, I learned that I didn't have to number them. I could just put it in and then go back and just insert it. And if I wanted to repeat something, I could just make a function and call that. And I'd have to declare the variables, which I always thought was a pain, and still do. But I adapted to it fairly quickly because it just made sense to me. The commands were different, but I adapted.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that some people just get it automatically, and some people it takes a bit longer for them to warm up to it. And I think it's just how people's brains work. But I want to dive a little deeper into something there, which is we've seen in the past, I'd say 20 years, the evolution of programming from something that one person can do. 20, maybe 25, 30 years ago, you could say, this is my program. I wrote this from start to finish. I wrote everything that has anything to do with this program, from the user interface to the back end. Of course, back then, it wasn't connected to anything. It was a standalone program. But you could say, I did every aspect of this piece of software.
Yeah.
You can't do that today. Nowadays, if you're writing something in its entirety, you're probably working too hard.
Yeah. People have made so many modules that can be adapted for whatever situation you need that it's a huge time saver. If you need to calculate what day of the week it is on November 12th, 1955, you don't have to go and write your own thing to do that. Somebody's already written a module in Perl, PHP, or anything. You can just call that and figure it out. But yeah, back in those days, it was a lot of manual work because you had to figure out how to do it yourself.
Right. Yeah. And I remember I lived in a dorm when I was studying computer science, and there was one guy in our dorm who he was brilliant, and he could do it all. And you'd sit down and you'd go, oh, okay, I get that. Oh, that's fantastic. You wouldn't have that one guy anymore. Or you'd look at that one guy and you'd go, that's nice and all, but I could have just downloaded 5 modules in the time took you to write that one, and it would have done everything that you wanted it to do.
Yeah.
And
well,
some people bemoan the loss of that. You've lost the artistic side of programming.
yeah, and I do like that side a lot, and I still do a lot of stuff myself, even though I could probably, like some of my websites, I could probably just put WordPress on it and install a few modules and be done. But I like having more control over it myself and being able to customize it. And if I just put in WordPress, well, then I have to put in a module, and if it breaks, then how can I fix it? And if the module is not compatible anymore. But if I do it myself, I know every line of that code, and if it's wrong, it's my own fault, but I can fix it.
I'm going to get really snobby here. This is not what I believe, but this is something that I've heard people say, which is there are no true programmers anymore. There are people who assemble Lego pieces and they make a couple of changes to a few variables, maybe rewrite a line or two, and they call that programming. I don't believe that, but I understand where they're coming from. I understand why programmers, especially if you grew up way back when, would look at what we have today and say, well, that's not programming, you're just copying and pasting.
Yeah, well, it's the same for, like, if you're designing with object-oriented, are you just pulling in the stuff and attaching it together? I mean, do you know how to make the changes? It's different levels of...
W8SS Joe in the chat room says no optimization, and that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And actually, I talked about this last week, which is I think the hardware has made us a little lazy because the hardware is now so fast and so cheap that no one really cares about optimizing anymore. I mean, when we were working on very limited systems, you couldn't just copy and paste code that may or may not work because it would run too slow. Nowadays, it's like, you know what, I don't care if 90% of the cycles are wasted because the 10% that are left is more than enough to run my program quickly.
Yeah. I mean, why does Chrome need to take up so much memory?
Right.
It's a browser. It's very basic. But like video game programmers need to get every ounce out of their system for the performance. So I think they probably put a little more effort into figuring out, you know, how can I get more performance out of this? Whereas somebody that's doing a word processor, well, they get more processing power than they need anyway, so whatever. But it's like people that do HTML design, if they're using Dreamweaver, they may not know the specifics of how the HTML works. But if they code it themselves, they have to know, what does this CSS do? What does this HTML do? So,
let's move beyond your college years and move into your professional years, because you have quite the experience. You've been at a lot of interesting companies,
yes,
I'll say.
Yeah.
Take me for the first one. Where was the first place that you got a paying job, a professional position where you could prove that this career could support you?
Well, my first paying job was a shoe warehouse, but we'll move beyond that. And I also worked as an intern in the IT department at Central Maine Power, which was good experience. I got to see the corporate culture and how things work in that environment. But my first real job out of college was called the Internet Company. It wasn't the Internet Access Company. A lot of people said, oh, you work at it? No, the Internet Company.
So you literally worked at the Internet.
I worked at the Internet. If you went to internet.com, you would get to our homepage. It's not there anymore. They went out of business in 1997.
Wait, the Internet shut down?
The Internet Company went out of business in 1997. They were a company that did consulting. We were doing websites for Ziff Davis, Comdex, Photo News Network, and some fairly big clients, some in Germany and England. And so we would do, that's where I learned to do Perl, because I got there and they gave me the Camel book and said, here, learn Perl. And so I learned Perl on the job and was doing CGI scripts for all these websites. And it was a lot of fun because I got to learn so much, and I was doing interface things, which I love to do, and on the web, and I was getting paid for it. And it was this brand new frontier. The internet was just catching on, because I started there in '95, the end of '95, and yeah, it was a great experience.
The internet really is a formative moment for the current generation of programmers. And you can actually step back and you can look at it and what did computer science, computer programming look like before the internet, and what did it look like after the popularization and easy access to the internet. And I think companies like the Internet Company are really good examples of that, where you had the corporate culture, which you had previously experienced, realized, oh, we have to be part of this. And so they got these hotshot programmers to come in and design them something, create something for them.
And that's what we were doing for Ziff Davis and Comdex. We were putting them on the internet really for the first time, or at least improving their websites so that they would have more of what they needed. Unfortunately, the Internet Company went out of business in 1997. They had decided push technology was big at the time, so they were going to do products based on that. There was going to be a screensaver that would deliver push news to you. There was going to be, they were doing a chat tool, which was a lot like IM. They were doing something to monitor where your kids went on the internet so that you could make sure they stay out of trouble. But they had these products. We were talking to Reuters for news delivery, and before they actually sold any of them, they decided, all right, we're going to stop doing the consulting part. And so because in our engineering team, our team and the design team were the only ones that did billable work to clients. And when we didn't have any billable work to do, and it's like, all right, let's play Quake.
That's actually another hallmark of the internet generation, which is some companies forgot that they need income.
Yeah, and well, this was the start of this. This was way before the internet boom. But they, when I saw the writing on the wall when I wasn't having billable work and things were not looking good, so I started looking for a job, and I left the Internet Company, and a month later they shut their doors, and they sold off Internet.com. Do you care to guess how much they sold Internet.com for?
Well, if you were selling that off today, that would be worth at least $10 million. A couple of 100,000 maybe?
Yeah, a few 100,000. Oh. I know. And yeah. Just a few years later in the internet boom. Yeah. And at one point, our IT department set up help at Internet.com for internal IT issues. And I said, this is going to be just like 15 minutes before we start getting junk. No, it was like 5 minutes. And then in a day, we had hundreds of emails. There could have been a business there helping people, but people type internet in their browser. They go to our homepage. And we went out of business.
Take me to the internet. Okay.
So,
all right, so done with the internet.
On,
The Internet Company shuts down,
yep.
And you've already moved on to greener pastures, which were?
It was a green monster. It was Monster.com, or the Monster Board at the time, and the world's first job search website. I looked for the job on the Monster Board and found it with the Monster Board. So I was doing a lot of coding on their site, and
What was your language there?
They were doing ASP.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And so it was fairly easy to pick up.
Actually, this is another good point, which is, as a professional, moving between languages. So you get to the Internet Company and they say, oh, we need you to know Perl, because we do Perl here. And one of the things that we've told our audience a lot is that it doesn't necessarily matter what language you're using. You just need the concepts behind the languages, and then you can jump between them. Did you find that as you're moving from company to company, language to language?
Yeah. A lot of the programming fundamentals are the same between languages. So I mean, it's a function, it's a procedure, it's a subroutine. It's all essentially the same thing. They just name it something different. The way it prints things, the way you declare variables, there's some variations, but once you get the general syntax, it's fairly easy to adapt. And so I was able to go from Pascal to C, to Perl, and then ASP, and picked up others along the way.
Dallas in the chat room has an interesting question. He says, what happens to the code for a company when it goes out of business? Because it used to be, your code base was one of your biggest treasures. That was your IP, and you could sell that off. It kind of seems to get abandoned a lot.
Yeah, as far as I know, the internet company's code base, well, since we did consulting for other clients, they retained it. They still had their websites running. Like we did, I forget if Ziff Davis was download.com or shareware.com. It was one of those, and we did one of whichever one Ziff Davis had, we did that site before it merged with CNET, and but they kept it. But as for the internal internet company code, it just got trashed with the server, I assume. Monster is still around, but that code's long gone. They switched over years later to .NET. And after I left the Monster board and went to expertcentral.com, which closed, and their code just got erased. It was owned by about.com. They merged it. They also had allexperts.com and Expert Central, and they decided we didn't need two expert sites. So they closed us down and kept the one that had like one employee.
Can you talk about code flushing? One of the things, again, in the era that I grew up, if you were part of a team that was developing something big, let's say you're working for Microsoft and you're on the Windows team or in the Office suite, you assume that the code that you write is just going to be built upon. It's going to become legacy.
Yeah.
And they may be using the same code base for the next 15, 20 years. At least that was the assumption. Nowadays, it seems as if you could get this code flush where you'll have a development team come in and say, you know what? Nope. Chop it all. We'll make a few things compatible, but we've got a much better language we can write it in now. We've got a much better team, has a better idea of what we actually wanted to do. And so we're going to do away with the legacy code. That used to be unheard of. And yet I hear development shops doing that a lot more these days. Is this becoming more popular?
I think it depends on what code you had there before. If it's just not something that could be maintained, or it's not as efficient, or if it's just been modified so many times that now it's just this Frankenstein monster of code that it's just so inefficient and so unmanageable. It's like, let's just start over. Or there's just a brand new system that you have to move to. And so sometimes it's just, okay, on this day we switch over to the new site, or sometimes it's, okay, we'll move this section and then we launch this section and this section. That's what we used to do at Monster when we'd redo things. Instead of the whole site, where who knows what's going to happen, we would do a section at a time. And fortunately, each section of the site, whether it's job search or resume builder, it was compartmentalized enough that we could just do one section, and it wasn't necessarily tied to the other sections.
I think that's what I heard a lot from some of these teams, which is we've inherited such a hydra that's doing things that was never intended to do. A great example of that is you're programming for Windows, which came from a time before not just the internet, but before network connectivity.
Yeah.
And all these things have been hung off of modules that weren't supposed to do that. And at some point, you have a development team coming in and saying, it's not worth it to do this anymore. Things are breaking all the time. Let's wipe the slate clean.
Yeah.
But it is kind of interesting because in that sense, the programmer, as you get past the code monkey stage into the code warrior stage, you have to be able to make that judgment of, no, the stuff that came before me is junk. It's gone now.
Yeah. And at what point do you stop repairing your car and just buy a new one? Right. At what point do you just tear down the house and build a new one? Same thing, same sort of thing works there too.
We want to keep talking about tearing down the house when we get back. I'm here with Patrick Delahanty, the code guru here at the Twit TV studios. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take another break to talk about the second sponsor of this episode of Coding 101. It's the one-stop shop for all knowledge on the internets. It's lynda.com. Now, lynda.com is a great place to go for knowledge. And I really mean all knowledge. It's not just about training on new software. It's not just about learning new skills. It's not just learning about business techniques or software. It's about a reference for all the things that you already know that maybe you need a refresher course. That's what lynda.com does for you, and that's what lynda.com does for us. It's an easy and affordable way to help you learn that can instantly stream thousands of courses created by experts on software, web development, graphic design, and so much more. Lynda.com works directly with industry experts and software companies to provide timely training, often the same day that new versions of software suites are released, so you're always up to speed. All courses are produced at the highest quality, which means they're not going to be like that YouTube video filmed in the basement with a shaky camera phone. I mean, I love YouTube, but sometimes you want good lighting, you want good cameras, you want good audio, you want good production values so you can focus on what you want to learn rather than the way the lesson was created. They also include tools like searchable transcripts so you can jump to the part of a lesson that deals specifically with the problem that you're having. And they have certificates of course completion, which you can publish to your LinkedIn profile if you're a professional in the field and you want a future employer to know what you've trained in. Whether you're beginner or advanced, Lynda.com has courses for all experience levels. You can learn while you're on the go with the Lynda.com app for iOS and Android, and one low monthly price of $25 gives you unlimited access to over 100,000 video tutorials. Premium plan members can also download project files and practice along with the instructor, and premium members with an annual plan can download course files to watch offline, making it the perfect reference. Now, Lynda.com also has courses on foundations of programming, up and running with the standard PHP library, simple Android development tools, and how to teach kids programming with iOS. There's even a series on programming for non-programmers. In other words, if you've ever wanted to fill in your knowledge gaps on coding, or if you've just wanted to start from scratch, Lynda.com is a great place to start. But for any software you rely on, Lynda.com can help you stay current with all your software updates and learn the ins and outs to be more efficient and productive, which is always a worry whenever we switch to a new code base, a new project, or a new product. And we've got a special offer for all of you to access all the courses on Lynda.com free for 7 days. Just visit lynda.com/C101 to try Lynda free for 7 days. That's lynda.com/C101. Again, that's lynda.com/C101. And we thank Lynda for their support of Coding 101. I'm here with Patrick Delahanty, the code guru here at the Twit Brick House. We've been talking a little bit about his past, what brought him into programming, and what his professional experience has looked like. But now I want to move, Patrick, into some advice for code monkeys. This is something that we're passionate about because we believe people should know how software works. Not just because they're going to be a programmer, but because everyone should have at least a basic understanding of the tools that basically run people's lives these days. And from the early days of my coding experience, getting my head around the logic of how code worked, how it processed through and did all the statements, that helps me understand. I can look at other programs that other people have written and in most cases figure out, oh, they probably did this and they probably had it run like this. And then if I can look at the code, then I can often see, oh, yeah, they did it that way, or maybe, oh, they did it this other way, and maybe theirs is more efficient and I learned something, or mine is more efficient and I can suggest a change. One of the very first things that we tried to teach people on Coding 101 is it's all about the logic tree. You know, it's all about being able to take a problem, something that you want to solve in the real world, and then breaking it down into its component pieces, because it's difficult to program drive my car down the road. Much easier to program start my car, figure out where my car is, figure out what's around my car, figure out where I am in my car, and then make those modules, those pieces of logic connect to one another. Could you take me through what it looks like when you are taking a real-world project? If you can, talk about your real-world projects right now. How you figure out where you want the logic tree to be, and then how you break that down into actual pieces that you're going to code.
I usually just start with pen and paper, and I don't do an actual flow chart, but I'll just kind of write out like an outline of what I need it to do, and then I'd fill in the various steps and say, okay, I'd have the major points here, and then I'd go in and say, okay, now it needs to do this, it needs to check this, it needs to connect to the database and get the list of this, it needs to verify that, and I'd just start doing that and get at least the major bullet points in there for what I'd want to code and make sure I get everything. And then I can think about like, okay, well, from a code point of view, how do I want to approach this? Which parts should be their own modules or subroutines, and what sort of database structure do I need if I need one, and just start to turn that pseudocode into actual code.
In the process of turning pseudocode into actual code, there is a step that the most elite programmers will go through, which is deciding what language they're going to use. Because the best programmers are not just conversant in one or two languages. They know multiple languages, and so they'll say this one's best done in Perl, and this one's best done in Java. Probably not a lot of us would say that. This one's best done in C#, so on and so forth, going down the line. What are the languages that you fall back to most often when you're turning the pseudocode into actual code?
Well, I usually fall back on the ones I'm most familiar with, of course. But then it depends on what the purpose of this is. If it's front-end web code, I'll probably go with PHP. If it's a lot of back-end things, Perl, I'd still use for that, especially if I have to do something that has to be called in a CROD. I like doing those in Perl. And those are pretty much my go-to languages now, especially with the stuff I'm doing here at TWiT. There's a couple things in Perl, but most of it is in PHP.
I'm going to put you on the spot here because I was speaking with one of my friends who was a professional programmer, and he says his biggest programming sin sometimes, no, I wouldn't say sometimes. I'm trying to purposely obfuscate who this person is because he get fired. But he says that sometimes he will bend the logic or bend the task to fit the programming language he wants to use rather than using the programming language he should use. Have you ever been tempted by that particular sin?
Oh, sure. I mean, I'm not going to go out and learn a whole new programming language just because it has one way to make something simpler, because there's all sorts of other issues there, and in the long run it's just going to not be worth the time and effort. But overall, if there's something that like, oh, this would really, like when I do an iOS app, I'm not going to use Perl. I'm actually going to go out and have to do things using another language. But if I'm doing something on the web, there's ways to do it in PHP or Perl, and I've done some things in Perl that could probably be done better. I've done a lot of things in Perl that could probably be done better in PHP. I've done some in PHP that could be done better in Perl. But usually it's, okay, started doing this in this. I don't want to have to rewrite everything, so let me just put in this little kludge and get it to work.
I found personally that when I put the kludge in and the kludge works, very rarely do I go back and fix the kludge.
Well, if something necessitates rewriting later on, maybe then I'll be like, okay, I should probably do this in this other language so that it works better.
Can you talk at all, because of course this is the project that you're working on here at the Brickhouse, can you talk at all about some of the new features coming up in the TWiT TV website? Because this is, I mean, can you actually? Or
I would love to, but I don't know them because our website's being done by 4 Kitchens. And what I think has been said already and is public knowledge is that they will be using Drupal and Node.js. And so it's kind of a headless Drupal. And so it's going to be a lot easier to upgrade in the future.
Are we baking an API into that thing?
Yes, there will be an API. I reached out to all our third-party app developers asking what features they would like, and so we've got some API requests that we'll hopefully be able to get in there, and to aid app developers, anybody who wants to do a iOS, Android, or Windows Phone app will hopefully have easier access to get information from the TWiT site. And then even if you just want a desktop app or your smart TV app or anything, and
I think.
But think of that, a TWiT site with an API so that you can say, oh, well, show me all the episodes of Coding 101 and you get the list back. Or tell me when there's a recent one. Or
show me every episode ever that has Cranky Hippo or Brian Burnett.
Yeah, I want the Padre feed. I'm going to make a Padre app, and it has all Padre stuff.
Yeah.
And you'd be able to do that. And the API features are still yet to be determined, but yeah, an API is the way that we want to go.
I just figured out what I want you to come back for. So we're talking about having guests here on the wildcard episodes, and then having those guests actually give us some sort of start to finish programming module. I think your module has to be when this API is ready to go out, when we've got the new website up. You have to come in and show us, like in 3 quick lessons, how to use the API to make something.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And we can do that in Perl.
Of course.
Or no, we can actually do it in a variety of languages if we want. But it won't be ready until
it's gonna be
next year
it's gonna be
at some point. But once we definitely have to cover that once it's done, and maybe we can have some other app developers come on and say, hey, here's how I did this.
This is how I would do it, and this is what I want.
Yeah, I would love to see other people using that too.
Patrick, last bit. If you could wave to all of the Coding 101 audience, and especially people who are having a hard time at it, because there's a lot of people who are going through our back catalog right now, and they're just crying out for help. They're like, I don't understand this.
Yeah.
I know the code works, but I don't understand why it's working. What bit of advice would you, as a person who's in the profession, who does this for a living, what would you tell someone who is just about to give up, who is just about to say, forget this language or forget programming, I don't care anymore?
Well, there's reasons you might want to give up on a language, but on programming in general, no. I can understand being frustrated, but sometimes, even here when I'm coding something, sometimes I'll just get frustrated. I'll go home, come back in the next day, and it's like, oh, just put it on hold for a little bit, come back and look at it with a fresh face, and often that improves everything. But if there's sometimes I just get so deep into looking at something, I get frustrated, don't know why it's not working, and just take a step back, breathe, and come back, try it again. And maybe if the language isn't agreeing with you, try a different one, and hopefully something works out.
Fantastic. Patrick Delahanty, Code Warrior here at Twit TV. We want to thank you for being on this episode of Coding 101. Could you please tell the folks at home where they can find you, find your work? Because not all of your work is coding. Where should they find your content?
They can follow me on Twitter at pdelahanty, or my main website that links to all my other stuff is adequate.com. That's the first domain I ever registered, and I'm not giving it up. Oh yeah, great. There's a terrible picture of me from Intercom TV. That's
awesome.
That was a hangout. That's an awful picture. Thanks, Brian. Oh.
Now you know what I deal with
Stop it.
every single day. This is that's just.
You couldn't have gone to the picture underneath that.
Thank you again for being on Coding 101, for being with us through an entire coding module, teaching us Perl.
I loved it.
And now for being part of the new format. This, again, is a wildcard episode. You're actually going to see us getting back into coding. I believe we have one more wildcard because we're introducing the hosts, the co-hosts, who will be coming in to do modules with our audience.
Hey, this is episode 42.
This is episode 42.
42.
You are the answer for everything.
I don't know what that.
Life, the universe,
I can
all
try.
that stuff. Now, don't forget that you can always find us live here on the Twit TV network every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. I think we're in Pacific Standard Time now. If you drop by live, why not also drop by our chat room at irc.twit.tv? If you jump in, you'll be able to talk to some of the Twit Army folk who are great programmers and just funny people. Don't forget that you can drop by our show page at twit.tv/Twit Coding 101, or is it Coding 101? I always forget what we call it. That thing. Stop by there.
twit.tv/code/C101. Both of those work.
They all go to the same place. You'll be able to find our entire inventory of episodes and all the different modules that we've done so far, as well as subscribe. That's right, you can get Coding 101 automatically into your device of choice, be it your iPhone, your Android device, your tablet, your laptop, your PC. You want high definition video, standard definition video, or audio, it's all right there for you at twit.tv. You can also follow me on Twitter. If you find me at twitter.com/PadreSJ, that's at Padre SJ, you'll find out what we're doing on every episode of Coding 101, and you'll be able to suggest topics for future episodes of Coding 101. In fact, right now we are gathering up a monster list of guests that came from you both from our Twitter feed and from our Google Plus page that tells us who you want to see and what projects you want to see done. That's coming right up soon. Just drop on by. You also can drop by our, oh, that's right. That's how Cranky Hippo walks into Twit every single day. Don't forget to stop by our Google Plus page at plus.google.com/twitcoding101. While you're there, you'll be able to both ask questions and answer questions if you're a code warrior or a code expert. And join a strong community, people who are dedicated to teaching other people how to code. Until next time, I'm Father Robert Balaser. This has been Coding 101. End of line.